Good morning, everybody. We're just welcoming everyone into the room. We will start at around 11:30. So we'll just give a few extra, about 10 minutes for everyone else to join in.
We have another 10 minutes to get started.
Hi, everybody. Just welcoming new members to the new participants to the room. We're going to start at 11:30. So thank you for joining early. Just give us a few minutes.
Hello and welcome, everyone. We are just going to wait for a few more people to get joined. We are going to start at 11:30 sharp. And I hope everyone enjoyed the first session this morning.
It was great.
Yeah. Welcome everyone to ICF Singapore 2020. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Avni Martin and I will be your host for this session today. It's wonderful to see so many of you join us here today. And I'm really excited about this morning's GALLUP Tools and Live Demo session by Kanika Singh and Vidya Thomas. Before we start, here are some ground rules to ensure a smooth and successful session. Throughout the webinar, please keep your microphones on mute, except for the open floor segments. If you have a question or would like to share something, please type it in the chat box on your right. There will be a Q&A session at some point in the session for the speakers to take your questions. At the end, there will be a feedback session, feedback form for the session, which will also allow you to register your interest for a follow-up workshop by GALLUP. It's the same form that will be used for your CCEU certificate application also. The link will be shared at the end of the session in the chat box, so please follow that link. So this part is very important. So in order for you to receive your CCEU certificate from this session, you will need to attend this live webinar in full. There will be no issuance of partial CCEUs. At the end of the webinar, you will be given a QR code on the screen and a link in the chat box that will take you to the online form to collect your details for the certificate, allowing you to opt in for the follow-up workshop by GALLUP and the feedback for the webinar. Please make sure that you put your full name and email address provided in order for us to issue your certificate. We will not be able to issue you the certificate if you don't go through the link. Application for the CCEU will close 24 hours after this webinar. Thereafter, you will receive your CCEU certificates in June 2020. So now, I believe we're ready to get started. It's my pleasure to introduce to you our speakers, Kanika Singh and Vidya Thomas. Kanika leads the business development team in Asia to help GALLUP's clients fulfill their goals, is a trusted advisor on workplace management practices and their impact on business performance. Kanika has deep experience in leading GALLUP's consulting team, applying GALLUP's tools to support consultants as they work with GALLUP clients to solve their business challenges. Kanika served as a senior consultant with a market research company, consulting organizations, managed business development, and delivered meaningful solutions to clients across multiple countries in Asia, including experience of working for a software development firm in India. Kanika received her bachelor's degree in engineering from a university in Baroda. In fact, that's where I was born, Kanika, and an MBA in Singapore. Thank you, Kanika, for being with us here today. We also have the pleasure of introducing Vidya. Vidya Thomas is a certified leadership strengths consultant with GALLUP, leading GALLUP's executive assessment work in Asia Pacific region. Vidya is also a certified selection consultant at GALLUP. She has experience consulting around talent-based hiring and the development and retention of employees. Before joining GALLUP, Vidya worked in HR in APAC and US. Vidya went on to undertake research roles in both profit and non-profit organizations to build her base of knowledge and contribute to groundbreaking discoveries. Vidya Thomas has her bachelor's degree and honors in psychology and sociology from Monash University and in Australia. So thank you very much, Kanika and Vidya, for joining us here today. I'll hand over the floor to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Avni. I'll go ahead and share my screen here. Just nod to me if you can see my screen well. Okay, perfect. All right. Thank you for the introduction, Avni, and good morning and a warm welcome to everyone joining this session today. Really excited to do this virtually because I think we have crossed quite a few borders today by this measure done by ICF, because I see a lot of hellos coming from different countries, not just from Singapore. So that's amazing and something exciting about the virtual world today. Thank you to ICF for organizing this as well. Before we get started, I think, and I'll go through some introductions and what we're going to do today shortly, I just wanted to say a quick hello to everyone. We're going to try to make this as interactive an hour as possible. So in the spirit of that, I would love for you to just drop a hello in the chat box that Avni talked about and tell us how you know Gallup. So what do you know about Gallup? Just say a hello and tell us how you know Gallup. So that'll be great if you can share with us in the chat box. We'd love to hear from you, fill out a few of your responses, and get this interactive and going. We'll ask you to give more responses as we go along. So this will be a quick test run for that too. So feel free to say a hello and tell us how you know Gallup in your chat window with us. Right, Vidya, do we have some chats coming in over there?
Yes, I'm seeing a lot of Strengths Finder,
Okay.
as expected, and knowing about their strengths, somewhere around our engagement and Q12.
Okay. Oh, good, great.
Quite a few strengths coaches, yeah.
Perfect, perfect. Thank you so much. Sorry, I can't see the chats while I'm presenting, so but that's why I'm getting Vidya to read those for us. But that's amazing to hear from all of you. And for those of you that are wondering that this workshop agenda said that it was Gallup tools, do not worry. We are going to talk about the favorite tool, Strengths Finder, that many of you have shared that you know us about. We are going to cover Strengths Finder as a tool in the workshop. But what we thought would be good to look at, not just the Strengths Finder tool, but look at it through the lens of everything that's happening around us. So we wanted to look at how people are going through this disruption. What are some key needs that they have in this time? And how can we address them using who they are as people? So that's the lens we'll look at today. We'll be sharing Gallup's research on this topic. Gallup, as all of you know, you've heard about Gallup here or there, but we are a research-based consulting firm. And what we do is our mission is to solve the most pressing problems in the world using data and analytics about everything connected to human behavior. So we've been studying human behavior, the attitudes of people for about 8 decades now. So we hope to share some research with you around human behavior, around the needs of people today, and hope that you can take this back and find it useful in what you do every day. So Avni's already introduced us, but I like to point out my top 5 there on the screen that you see. That's how we introduce each other at Gallup using the Clifton Strengths introduction that we have. I also have Vidya Thomas, who Avni has introduced, but I would just want to add Vidya's an executive coach with us with over 16.5 years of experience just at Gallup coaching, and she has over 12,000 hours of deep coaching experience. And where we hope to leverage this in the session today is we're going to actually talk to Vidya a little bit about her experience, especially in this current period and how it's playing out in the times of COVID-19 crisis. So with that, I just want to make one quick housekeeping thing for all of us to share. We have a full house on Gallup team. So there are 5 lovely team members that I have on the call with me today. So you have Angie, Anna, Daryl, Dorothy, and Rishi on this call with me. They are from Gallup. You can see their brief strengths introduction there on the screen. For any questions that you have or any thoughts or comments as we go through this session, you'll find one of them responding to you as well. They are a very able Gallup team, which you can also get in touch with after the session if you need anything from us. So in case you're wondering who's Anna or who's Angie, they are from Gallup and they will help you answer the questions as we go along. So with that, I would just like to get started by talking a little bit more about what I mentioned, that why are we talking about, what do people need in these times, right? So Gallup did a research around leadership around a decade ago, and we explored when we were looking at leadership, from a little bit of a different lens. So every leadership study that was out there was looking at what do leaders need to do, what are the needs of leaders. But what we found that there was some missing piece in research was what do followers need from people. And that's kind of the work that we went into deep dive into, that what are the needs of followers? What do people need from their leaders? And that was the basis of our research, which we titled Needs of Followers. Now, this research applies at all times and is very useful for both leadership and others to understand and know, but it's even more useful now, especially in the times of crisis. Now, one of the ways it applies to all of us, and which is why we thought it's very relevant for us to talk about it today, is that whether we are a leader in an organization or not, all of us in our roles are followers, right? We are following, and when I say followers, it doesn't mean following a leader in an organization. It can mean following anything that we do in our lives. So all of us play the roles of followers. And this really examines that from a purely human lens, that what do we need as followers. So today, as we look through this session, I would invite you to put on the lens of a coach or a developer or a leader or a manager that you may be in any organization, and really look at these needs and try to see how can we address these needs both for ourselves and for the people that we coach or interact with. So this has been the basis of the study, and it's something that applies to millions of individuals across the world. Now, before we get into the semantics of what the study was, a quick thought experiment with all of you. So all those nice people on this call, I would love to again have your inputs on this specific question. Share with us what leader has had the most positive influence on your daily life, and use 3 words to describe that contribution. Share with us what has this person contributed to your life. Just type it in the chat box. You don't have to tell us the name of the leader. You can just share those 3 words of contribution that they've had to your life. I'll give us about 30 seconds or so to respond. Vidya, what are we hearing on our chat?
Making me feel heard, caring, understanding, trust, respect. They're going so quickly. Patience, empathy, trust, compassion, confidence, empathy again, positive energy, supporting growth, encouragement, vision, inspiration, resilience, walking the talk.
Amazing.
Respect, honesty, growth. Yeah. Interested in me.
Oh, that's great. And a lot of what you guys are sharing, thank you. Keep sharing. We'll definitely have a read through it. I apologize if we're not able to read out loud all the responses, but we really appreciate you sharing with us what a leader has contributed to your life. And why I asked you this question is, this is pretty much how we grounded our research when we were doing this needs of followers study. So we asked people about, who has contributed to their life, what do they feel about this leader's contribution? And the words that came out, we asked more than 10,000 people around this question, and over the 30,000 plus responses that we got, the themes that came out sounded very similar to what all of you have been sharing with us, things like caring, understanding, trust, compassion, and we almost synthesized these themes into really come into the 4 needs of followers. And this is what we'll be talking about broadly today, that when we look at what followers need, we are able to identify 4 key needs. And these are trust, compassion, stability, and hope. So we'll be talking a lot more in depth around each of these needs. And I almost want to challenge you to do this as we talk about the content and we share with you our research. I challenge you to think about every interaction that you're having, every conversation that you're doing, every coaching that you'll have. How can you apply this filter to all those communication that you are doing on a day-to-day basis? So with that, I'll pass it on to Vidya to talk to us about trust.
Okay, thank you, Kanika. So let's start with trust. all four needs that Kanika mentioned earlier are clearly important, but trust is very foundational for making the other areas work. So it's quite difficult for others to believe in what you're saying or doing, to influence any of the other areas if at first they don't trust you, right? So on the next slide, you'll see that one of the first things that is important to understand is, in order to be able to succeed as a leader in these times of disruption, frankly, actually at any other time, is that the way people react to a crisis or even everyday situations is driven a great deal by emotion, right? And emotions come fast. So this explains your reflex action when someone slams the brakes on you, in front of you, you just react. Daniel Kahneman, and some of you may be familiar, he won a Nobel in economics, and he's author of the global bestseller, Thinking, Fast and Slow. He demonstrates that we're not rational creatures, but instinctive ones. And any attempt to make us think rationally must take into account that inbuilt bias, or we fail, right? So we must consider the emotional aspects of people's experience in order to help them navigate, through disruption successfully. So being human with one another, admitting that some level of anxiousness is normal and felt by all, for example, is one step in the right direction for then helping us lean into the rational next steps that we can take. So these are the types of things that we're going to be exploring in this session. So I wanted to point you to some statistics. Consider these statistics. Overall, 39% of employees strongly agree that if they raised a concern about ethics or integrity, their employer would do what is right, 39%. Now, that figure jumps to 61% among those who are extremely satisfied with their immediate manager or leader. And engagement increases sixfold when employees trust their organization's leadership. So, employees who trust their leaders are twice as likely to say they will be with their company 1 year from now. Globally, we can do a lot better. I think leadership is incredibly important. So I wanted to take a pause here, and again, feel free to use the chat box, and Kanika can help me monitor that, to give one word describing how you build trust today. How do you build trust today? Try to keep it to one word, but just think about that. What are you doing? Honesty, empathy, listening, a lot of listening. Connection, reliable, warmth. Keeping promises, yes. So keep that coming, as you reflect on what other people are also saying. What I also wanted to bring your attention to is these words: honesty, integrity, which I've seen some of you type, respect. These words were examples of the most frequent words that came up when people were describing trust as part of the research insights for our book, Strengths-Based Leadership. So if we can go to the next slide, think about these statements as well that you see next to them. I want you to think about high-performing teams you have encountered or been a part of. Trust actually isn't something they talk about very often because they live it. It is something that they create every day. It's actually low-performing teams that tend to talk about trust or the lack of it at a much higher frequency. Warren Buffett said, trust is like the air we breathe. When it's present, nobody really notices. When it's absent, everyone notices. So, more than ever, I think with leaders, trust is not only built just through communication, but your actions also speak volumes. If I am a leader who talks about doing the right thing, but I'm consistently seen to move away from that or do the wrong thing, no trust will be built because I will only be seen as a hypocrite. So great trust building leaders also know that they have to be honest and open, even with difficult news, right? Or when talking about their own flaws, actually. I think the best leaders know who they are, but they also know who they're not. and they're also aware of the emotional component that we discussed earlier. They speak from the heart. One essential thing that came out of the research, again, around strengths-based leadership and in many of our studies regarding leadership, is that if you as a leader want to be trusted, you must choose to trust. When you choose to trust others, people will trust you. Now, what do we mean by that? Let's take a look at that a little more closely. How do you choose to trust someone? When leaders move to a new leadership role, they often continue to lead at the level of leadership that they were in previously. In other words, they continue to do the work of their past position rather than really developing the talent of the people below them to take these responsibilities. So it's important to lead at your level. When there is a space in a situation for an employee to make a decision, but you as a leader fill that space with your own way of doing things, you not only miss the chance to build trust, you actually break it. So to overcome this, you must trust, right? And you must have focused, frequent, and transparent conversations that can be informal, but create a shared sense of accountability through the dialogue and make people feel that they are trusted and considered to be business partners to you. So here are some questions to help you conduct these focused, frequent, and transparent conversations in a way that will open the door to building trust. And as I think about these questions, I think they're not just relevant for leaders, they're really relevant for any relationship that we have. If you think of it from the lens of a coach, from the lens of a partner, when you feel most trusted, what is happening to make you feel that way? What do I currently do that I should have you take more responsibility for or completely own? How often should we meet to have conversations about what you're working on? How can I support you? And when faced with a complex problem, what is a way for me to offer support that really helps us build trust with one another? So these are important questions to ask around building a trusting relationship. And I'm now going to hand you over to Kanika, who will take you through the next important need, which is really compassion. So with some of the candor that comes out of trust, I think we also need to be able to display compassion.
Thank you, Vidya. Yeah, very lovely questions there on trust, and a lot to think about, both trust building, even in a coaching relationship that a lot of coaches in this call might be having on an ongoing basis, and how we can apply that. So let's talk about compassion now a little bit, right? And I think there is a lot of us that don't need to be explained in terms of compassion being so important right now. But as we look at the world around us today, I'm sure all of us will agree that there are many leaders and many organizations today that are demonstrating a lot of great compassion, and we feel very happy to see that. But personally, and also as an organization, we have observed a lot of leaders have found it very hard to really show the right level of compassion that is required by their employees and the people they lead. And one of the things we need to remember about compassion is that it's very hard to break ground on compassion once the time has gone. So it's really important to demonstrate compassion at the right time. And there is no more an important time than the present one to demonstrate that compassion. So before we get into compassion, as I love hearing from all of you, I'm going to give you a quick opportunity to share with us that when you were a recipient of compassion, think about one instance when you were a recipient of compassion yourself, and share with us one word that describes how that response made you feel. So when you were going through somebody's response, or when you received compassion, how did you feel?
Yeah, we have some nice ones here. Heard, understood, appreciated, thankful. I felt loved, included, warmth, supported. I mattered.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Please keep sharing with us. And this is really great to hear. But as As all of you can also see each other's responses, one of the things you will realize about compassion is that it is a feeling. A lot of those words that all of you are sharing with us are feelings that you experienced when you received compassion. And if you look at the definition of the word compassion, its origins are from the word calm and pati. So calm is actually community and pati is more like suffering. So it almost talks about suffering together in a way. Literally, the word means that, right? So what it really talks about is really feeling or perceiving someone suffering very authentically and trying to help them alleviate that suffering. And those are the words people talk about when they talk about compassion from leaders as well. So when we did our study that I was talking to you about, when we asked people things like care, friendship, and some of you shared this earlier with us too, love, these were words that were mentioned as leaders' contributions to their lives. So let's go to a lot of compassion. A lot of you may get this question from your clients as well, that how does it connect back to what we are trying to do? We have got to get the business running. And at Gallup, we understand and we know from research that when we focus on what people care on a day-to-day basis, when they feel cared, it actually connects back to business outcomes very strongly. So when any person experiences care in their workplace, it translates into better retention, better customer experience, better productivity, and better profitability. So it is not just a soft feeling thing, it actually does tie in very strongly to how your business is going to perform. So as we dive into compassion a little bit more, a lot of you may have come across this research or may have seen this Harvard Business Review article about connecting what we are all going through as a society to stages of grief. So what we are experiencing now is very aligned to what we would or how we would process grief. There are some key stages, as you can see. It starts with almost like a denial. And I'm going to talk about this as I experienced it personally myself. And I live at Orchard Road, bang in the middle of Singapore. So initially, when all of this, crisis and pandemic started, it was almost like a denial that, it's not really going to affect me so much. I can still go for shopping. It's all Orchard Road is never going to come to a standstill. Come on. And then, slowly as it transitioned, it was almost a little bit of that anger. I came to know about, friends who had to cancel wedding. I, in fact, had a friend who lost her parent through this and couldn't even go to her father's funeral. There was a bit of that anger that why is this happening in the world? I don't really understand this. It translated into bargaining. And I look about it as a Gallup team together. We kept telling each other that we're going to work from home. We'll do this for 2 weeks. It'll be done. And then we'll move on from here. So there was that bargaining that we just do what we have to do, it'll be over soon. And then it transitioned almost together as a society. We moved into a state of sadness. And that's important to understand. There was a certain heaviness as we deal with it. Leaders across the world are taking tough decisions. There is people being put on furloughs. There's people, struggling for their jobs, their income. So there's almost that, shared sadness that we are experiencing. And then it transitions into acceptance, right? And which is where I think a lot of us are today with realizing that we are starting to call it the new normal. We're trying to see what comes out of it. We are not almost victims anymore, but transitioning more into how we are building the new future together, right? One stage that's not talked about here is that of meaning, which also follows after this, which is really recognizing the hardships we've gone through in this together. Also experiencing for ourselves that, whatever we missed in this period, how much more valuable that is, right? Talk about meeting a friend or catching up with your family, like how much more important that is once this is over, we're going to remember that. So there is that meaning from this crisis as well. So when we talk about these stages, why we're talking about it is we need to really know what are these stages of grief that we're experiencing, because there are a lot of emotions involved. As Vidya earlier mentioned, we're going through, a lot of emotions in this crisis, and we need to address these emotions well. So how do you really practically, address these emotions when it comes to every conversation or interaction that we are having? Here are some practical tips that we know will help in demonstrating compassion and really showing that feeling, is to ask more open-ended questions. Really ask people how they're feeling, instead of saying, hey, how are you doing today? Let's ask how you're feeling today, right? Let's ask what's been difficult for you in this period. And when somebody shares a feeling, help them reflect back those feelings. It's a lot which a lot of you might be doing in coaching conversations anyway, but try to do this a little more consciously as we talk to anyone. If someone shares with us, oh, I'm feeling very lonely in this period, reflect this back. I understand how this must be lonely for you. How can I help you through this, right? So really reflecting on people's feelings as well. And then think about how this connects, all of these feelings connect to our lives holistically. So Gallup has a framework around looking at a life well lived. And it's important really right now to understand how this is being impacted as we are navigating this. So Gallup's framework around a life well lived is called well-being. Now, many of you may have heard of well-being in different ways, forms, or you may have your own version of well-being, but this is how Gallup's framework on well-being is summarized. So it constitutes of 5 key elements. It talks about purpose. So you like what you do and you're motivated. There's social well-being, which is about relationships and love around us. Financial well-being, which is about your economic life. Community well-being, where you feel safe, where you have some pride where you live and you're able to contribute. And then physical well-being, which is of course critical right now in terms of having good health and good energy to get things done. So we've actually looked at this well-being framework for a very long time, but we're realizing that it's really important to look at it today and right now. So almost imagine that people's lives around us are like this bike, right? So nobody comes with just one element to their workplace or to a session or anything like that. We all have these components operating around us in our lives. So as we look at the crisis and everything that's happening today, I invite you to share with us, if you feel comfortable, that which of these elements of well-being have been impacted for you. Share with us, if you can, around which of these have been impacted in terms of, say, physical well-being or community or financial, purpose or social. Use that chat box to tell us which has been impacted for you the most right now. So we're seeing a lot of responses come in terms of many people sharing social. That seems to be quite a important theme that's coming up. Physical, of course, purpose as well. It's quite interesting. And many feel it's all of those elements, right? And I think why it's important for us to understand is that really right now, for a lot of us, this is how that bike wheel's looking, right? It's kind of distorted. It's not perfect. And it's different for each of us. While somebody's social well-being is being hit very actively, for someone else, it's about their jobs, it's financial more. For someone else, it's like physical well-being. And so it's important to really put on that lens of compassion as we talk about their well-being, to really understand what and how is it affecting people that we interact with. Ask them those questions and help them feel okay with those emotions. And when we do that, we know that it's going to actually make them better at what they do in their jobs. So it's going to actually contribute in organizations to better, attendance. So less workplace is less, absenteeism in the workplace. It also leads to actually less likelihood of people switching jobs when all of this is over. And it leads to, of course, less claims filed in the last year. So it's actually going to have a lot of positive impact into where people are working. So it's important to address those well-being elements. So I want to just leave you with some questions around, how you can build compassion by asking these questions to those around you, those in your life, that what is important to you, why, what do you feel good about in your life and work, and what is worrying you about your life and work? Ask these questions in your next conversation. And with that, I'll pass it to Vidya to talk to us about stability.
Thank you, Kanika. Okay, so earlier we talked about trust, and whereas trust is the emotional foundation for how a leader is perceived as they are meeting the 4 needs, stability is the psychological foundation for how a leader is actually able to meet those 4 needs. So what you're going to see here is a slide of a storm. And I want you to think about, have you ever experienced really bad turbulence on a flight? And when that happens, who do you look at to determine if it's an acceptable level of turbulence? Maybe the person next to you. You know, often I think you look at the flight attendant. If they're cool, you're cool. If they're panicking, you start to get a little worried, right? Similarly, when the people you lead are in the midst of a storm, they're looking at you to see how you as a leader weather that turbulence. You and I have what neurologists call mirror neurons in our brain, where we actually resonate with the emotion that someone else is experiencing. Therefore, that it's critical that a leader is calm when they're going through turbulence. So the brain of a team member literally tends to harmonize with the emotional tone of their leader's brain. So, many of us know that 70% of engagement is influenced by the manager, how we feel about our boss. Emotionally, we take our cues from the countenance of a leader. So how he or she is responding in a particular situation. It's critically important that a leader maintain what Clementine Churchill, Winston Churchill's wife, called Olympic calm, what she advised him to have in mixing with his power. And, 70% of how your team feels about their job really comes from you. So for your team, I think what we can say is that you as a leader or a manager are the single most significant cultural force within your entire organization. And so the way that you can convey a sense of stability for your team is really for you to be calm, right? But we're human. I mean, it's perfectly natural if a negative external event like we're experiencing right now provides an emotional challenge, even for the most emotionally intelligent managers. And so when you're internally fighting a storm, there are 5 questions that you can kind of ask yourself. And we know from Kahneman's research that I'd mentioned earlier, 70% of our decisions are emotional, right? And so the technical part of our brain where that comes from is the limbic system. When you and I say making decisions from the heart, we're talking about the limbic system of our brain. So it's very easy to get into situations where the limbic system of our brain is just overfiring. So for example, when you're trying to go to sleep at night and negative thoughts start to get into your mind, it's easy to get taken away by those emotions and then not be able to go to sleep, right? When that happens, there are ways that you can sort of bring some sense to those emotions. One of them is to ask, what am I feeling? Dr. Susan David of Harvard Medical School teaches us to separate the sentence, I am feeling anxious from I am anxious. By talking about the emotion, we create some emotional remove or psychological distance from the emotion. It helps us objectify the emotion and not over-identify with it. We're not anxious, we're not mad, we're not sad. Those are feelings. And feelings are like waves in the ocean, right? They come and go. Even if we are overreacting, on the next question, I think there is a basis of rationality as to why we're feeling that. Why am I feeling this? Well, there's a pandemic and it could be dangerous, and it could be dangerous to the people that I love. It could be dangerous to the people that report to me. Let's look at that. Let's take a firm look at that. Let's face that. But then, I think as we ask ourselves, what is actually true, we move from that emotional part of the brain, the limbic system that I mentioned, to the more rational, logical part, or the prefrontal cortex, what some psychologists refer to as the executive brain. And then we expand our vision from what is upsetting us to really look at the whole picture, right? And what is true is what we can do to mitigate this. We can focus on what we can influence rather than what we cannot control. We're expanding our vision to see the holistic reality of what is happening now. Yes, for example, there is a global pandemic, but there are specific actions that you can take to optimize your chances of survival. Social distancing, wearing a mask, washing your hands. And in the next question, we're bringing to bear our values construct, what we think is important. Right? Asking ourselves, in this situation, what is actually important? And what is important is that I pay attention to the people that that I love, I pay attention to my family, I pay attention to the people that report to me, and I make movements. You know, I make specific movements as to what it is that I need to do next. That motion, that intention, I mean, I think as you begin that momentum, you make it easier for yourself and others to think about more practical, effective ways to be able to address the current challenge. And so by running through these questions, I think we help to create a sense of internal calm that brings external stability to other people, right? And to summarize this, I think great leaders, if you think about all the needs, Kanika, sorry, can you go to the slide just before this? Yeah, great leaders, if you think about all the needs calmly, calm is the stability that we're talking about, balance, candor, which is the trust, and hope, which Kanika is about to talk about shortly, in the midst of the storm. And I think the desire to do that in itself is an expression of compassion. Mediocre leaders will overemphasize candor, right? And talk about, oh, how tough and bad things are. It's so difficult. And then other mediocre leaders will talk about, oh, this is just a season. Everything's going to be all right. Don't worry about it. And that lacks a little compassion. But I think the best leaders, they do both in a calm balance. And that brings stability to others. So I think about one of the responses to the pandemic, and I think about Chancellor Angela Merkel, you know, and commentator Ricardo Roa said of her, she communicates with scientific rigor, she communicates with calm, she disarms hysteria, right? And, you know, Germany's leading coronavirus expert, Christian Drosten, said that, yes, you know, she's extremely well informed. It helps that she's a scientist and can handle numbers. But I think it mainly comes down to her character, right? Her thoughtfulness and her ability to reassure. And that really is about that calm balance and the stability that you can bring to other people. So, you know, there are some questions that you can ask your teams or the people around you to help them move and have a more productive focus and really start thinking about what is it that I can control. So what do you feel are your most important priorities? What are you most clear about regarding your responsibilities at work? Maybe what are you least clear about? Where do you feel we work together effectively? Where do you feel we could work together better? Where do you consider our partnership to be more stable? You know, or where are we less stable? What is outside your span of control that you're worried about? And within that area, what is within your span of control? How can I best support you in that area? So, you know, I mean, these are some of the things that help you really think about what your employees need and how you can be in a good place as a leader to continue to be able to give hope to your people. And I'm just going to pass over now to Kanika, who will talk you through hope.
Thanks, Vidya. Beautifully said. And I think some of the people on the call love the analogies that you were giving. So with that, we come to hope, you know, the last of the four needs, but also one of the most important for all of us to have in order to look at the future together, right? And I would want to start with this beautiful quote that Dr. Shane Lopez, who's a former Gallup tribe member and wrote a book called Hope Happens, if you've read that, defined hope. So hope is the belief that the future will be better than the present, along with the belief that you have the power to make it so. So what I love about this quote is that it's talking about, of course, you know, that there's a level of optimism about where we are headed, but it's also talking about a level of agency, that what do we have to play our role in that future, or creating that together. So that's what I love about this quote. And with that, I think an important question is, when we talk about something as abstract as hope, how do we really create hope, right? How do we operationalize hope if we talk about it? Everyone wants to feel hopeful, you know, share hope. What's really, you know, hope going to look like when we look at operationalizing it? So hope happens when you have ideas and energy to achieve future goals. So we can almost break it down, you know, generating hope into three critical components. One is having goals. So what we mean by that is that, goals are usually set up with a very long-term view. When we look at our, regular pre-COVID times, it's a 1-year plan, 2-year journeys, 5-year roadmaps. Now, how do we revise those goals today and come up with new goals? Let's talk about even personal goals. How can you utilize this pandemic to really come up with your shared memories for you with your family, right? So that could be a new goal that you set up now. What's important is also to have that energy of ideas for people to contribute ideas to achieve that goal. So it's important to let people have channels to share ideas and be a part of how they will get to that goal. So for example, if somebody wants to, going back to that example, create memories with their families, what are some creative ideas that they can have to achieve that goal? Are we going to do something together? Are we going to take more photographs? Are we going to do journals? What does it look like, right? And then really the third and the most critical element is energy. So driving an energy behind those ideas to achieve those goals. And where does energy really come from? So energy comes from two places. It could come from everything around us, the environment that we have, and it can come from who we are within us, right? So coming from who we are naturally as people, how we think, feel, and behave as human beings, that drives energy around us. So it's almost like an emotional contagion, right? So partner with similar people, and you will get energy, but you'll also get energy when you're allowed to operate with who you are and be the best of who you can be. And really, that's where a lot of the focus around our behaviors and our hope generation needs to be. We need to work with who people naturally are, and we need to truly understand what they bring to the table to help them feel hopeful. Now, when it comes to truly understanding people, that's where Gallup's research around strengths comes quite handy, because we know from our decades of research that human behavior can be predicted. We've done enough analytics around it to say that we can identify certain patterns of thinking, feeling, and behaving that are productively applied. So they are recurring patterns. They come up again and again, and they create a filter for everything that we do. These patterns of how we naturally are also govern how we're going to respond to this crisis differently. How I respond versus what Vidya feels versus what Angie feels may be quite different in terms of the crisis. And that's where StrengthsFinder as a tool can really help you understand what are these natural patterns of people. It almost can give you a hack into individuals to getting to know what their response or their filters are going to be. We define the strengths of different individuals into what we call as talent themes. And we measure the presence of this talent themes using an online assessment. If any of you have already taken the StrengthsFinder assessment, you might be familiar with your own strengths or that of others around you. But it really is into 34 key themes of talent, and they are in a specific order for the person that takes this assessment. They are not in that order here on the screen, they're just in an alphabetical order. We also bucket these themes for ease of understanding into 4 key domains that you see, which is executing, influencing, relationship building, and strategic thinking. It's more talking about the nature of these talents connect to which area a little more. So this is how, when you understand somebody's patterns here, you're almost able to anticipate how they will behave. And what I mean by that is I'll take a quick example here to look at 2 strengths themes that we saw on the previous slide. One's activator and the other is deliberative. So we look at this as in the strengths lens, we call them contrasting themes as they play out. Activator, somebody that has high activator, is quick to implement ideas. They love getting started. And now think about how this plays out in crisis situations or when they're interacting. They want to do something. Their need is to really quickly get into some action. They would be your best people to kickstart those agile teams that you want today in any organization, your crisis response teams. They would love to do that. Whereas look at somebody who's high deliberative. Now this is a person who loves to evaluate all possibilities, puts a lot of thought into decision making, and is great at identifying risk. Now the response and the need of somebody deliberative is to really think through anything they are doing. So they would be a great people to address risk as we evaluate many new things. What does it mean as we take new decisions in the new normal? They are your go-to people for such decisions. So just knowing this about an individual can totally change the lens with which we approach them, the lens with which we converse with them, and how we allow them to be who they are. Now, you allow an activator to be a part of that team, it gives them that energy, that hope, and you allow the person with high deliberative to really be a part of a thinking process, and it gives them that energy and hope. So as we talk about this, I again would challenge you to take this back with you in terms of your strengths and think about what you need as you're navigating this disruption, right? So what are your needs through your strengths that are coming to play? And what do you bring? What do you bring to any conversation? What do you bring to any of your clients in terms of your strengths for navigating this disruption, right? And with that, I would just want to, talk about this quote from Don Clifton, who's a founding father, often known as the father of positive psychology. And his quote, which I love, is that the more you do what you do best, the more hopeful we are. So it's amazing that, all of us want to succeed in our lives. We all want to do better at what we do. And when we allow people to do that, it generates hope, right? And with that, actually, it's perfect for me at this point to leverage Vidya's experience, who's our executive coach at GALLUP. And for those of you that joined late in the session, she's been coaching with us for over 16 years with more than 12,000 hours of coaching. And it would be great to hear from her in terms of how and what is happening in this time of crisis in terms of practical coaching experience. And as I ask these questions to Vidya, I know a lot of you are experienced coaches in this call. So we would love to make this learning from each other, not just from GALLUP. So go ahead and share your responses, thoughts, and comments to these questions as Vidya answers them. So you'll see the questions I'm asking Vidya, and feel free to write your responses again in that chat box with us. So Vidya, maybe I'll start about, since we're talking about strength so much, how do you think knowing what people do best enhances your coaching?
Okay, so from my experience, I mean, it's a refreshing approach. Whether I'm coaching someone, at the highest level, or I've even worked with students around this, they're all quite open to talking about what they do well, right? And many of them say that people don't often ask, what do I do best, right? They're very clear and aware of their weaknesses, and that drives a lot of performance conversations as well in organizations. But knowing what they do best really helps increase the motivation and engagement. I feel it reduces defensiveness and barriers with people. They're much more open to talking about themselves and understanding, how what they can do can be enhanced in an even better way. Ultimately, I think it increases or improves self-awareness and also teaches you how to self-manage. Right? Where do I need to take this down a couple of notches? How am I landing with other people? So it gives me an insight into a person's language as well. So, if you're familiar with some of the themes, like achiever people with high achiever, they like to be productive, they like to be busy, so knowing that and kind of putting that in the language, there are other people maybe who need more time to think, when you see that they have a lot of thinking themes like intellection. So it really helps me think about how I want to position myself when I coach someone. I think the other advantage is also, Kanika, it gives you awareness of your own lens as a coach, right? And what I'm bringing into a session. Does my need to achieve a goal sometimes impact the way I kind of try and get my client to achieve a goal? So I'm much more aware, do I have high communication? Does that make me talk a lot sometimes? What do I need to be aware of? What's my best way to think? So I feel like knowing what people do best has really helped my coaching a lot. It's also, I want to say, an easy entry point into a lot of conversations. I'm sure many coaches out there might experience this, that there still is sometimes a stigma around coaching. I recently think about advising someone and telling her I knew a great coach for her, and her response to me was, I don't need coaching, I'm sorted out, right? And so often people kind of think that coaching means you've got a problem. So I think when you enter with a profile or a tool like StrengthsFinder, it's kind of a great entry point, I find, to a lot of coaching conversations or coaching journeys.
Great, thank you, Vidya. And a lot of our coaches are sharing as well. Like what you said, it helps in building rapport and opening up that connection with others too. Great. So I think as we took talking about Strengths Finder and the tools and talents that people bring to the table. How do you think our talents are actually going to play out in the times of crisis? Can you share some examples with us?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you think about some of the talents, and speaking to Strengths Finder particularly, a lot of people who have maybe for more influencing talents. So some of the things like woo or command. What I've heard from some clients, I talked to a client the other day, he's an MD, and he was like, I've got no one to influence now. I'm really struggling. I have to influence through the computer. And he says, I find that I'm not feeding that talent well enough. Maybe if you have high communication, or a lot of relationship themes, you live off your connections with other people. That also becomes harder. I mean, I think a lot of us are learning to navigate and connect through Zoom, but that need for connection becomes even stronger. With your high relator, as an example, people with high relator, they value authentic relationships, and it tends to be more deliberate and smaller groups. So sometimes large team meetings on Zoom aren't exactly the best forum for them, so, as a leader or as a coach, you're kind of thinking about how do I make that a little bit more one-to-one for this person? Or smaller group discussions, or maybe we get into the breakout rooms, that might be their time when they can feel a little more comfortable. I've seen a lot of memes on Facebook for people who consider themselves to be more introverts. They're like, this is our time, this pandemic, this is what we've always been about, right? So when people have a lot of thinking themes, maybe this is good time for them. There's a lot of time to think, intellection, analytical, strategic. Learners, I spoke to a lot of learners who kind of talked about different skills that they're learning to acquire, that there's so many things that they can learn. Achievers, they have this to-do list. How can I be productive in this time? So I remember talking with a client, because lists tend to be quite important for many people who have achiever. And we talked a little bit more about who do you want to be in this crisis, right? And how can you have a to-be list? If you feel there's not a lot of things you can be productive around, so there's still things you can be, and how do you tick those off, as you go through your day-to-day. So it helps you really think about, a person's lens and how they play out differently in this crisis, right? And again, I think it just lends to the fact that many of us know people are so unique.
That's great. That's great. I know some of you might have a hard stop here to kind of drop off. So as you're dropping off, we are continuing with the Q&A here. We would really appreciate if you can stay on for another 10-15 minutes as we wrap the session up. We'll probably need another 10 minutes more, but thank you if you have already kind of ran over your time. And I'll just quickly dive into the next question here in terms of, specific to coaching, and a lot of coaches on this call with you. So what has been different about coaching clients during this pandemic?
So as I think about the 4 needs that we talked about earlier, as a leader, you want to think it's not often that you can be perfectly balanced in all of them, but I would be concerned if, any one of them goes wildly out of control, or you're not having a lens on it. But there are certain needs that maybe you dial up a little bit more during specific situations. And what I found here is there's an increased need, obviously, for compassion, right? And for the space that people need. I found it different this time in a good way, actually. I used to do, some of you might be familiar, GALLUP does a lot of phone coaching over the phone. And what I found during this pandemic is people are increasingly asking me to turn on my video, right? And they're like, can we have the video on, right? So actually, in a funny kind of way, there's been an increased connection in that sense sometimes, even in this time when we've all had to pull away. So what's been different is I'm noticing that. I'm noticing that, understanding what people are feeling, even if it's an overreaction or seems to be an overreaction, is so important. And I know some people are benefiting from this, but I'm also very mindful of sometimes people who don't have a safe space at home, right? And being stuck at home, and even being able to have a conversation with you. How can they do that? Sometimes they're whispering, they don't want other people to hear. So, all of those things are I think what I found different, or maybe has come to my awareness a little bit more. About coaching clients during this pandemic. And of course, a very important thing, what I want to stress here is I think people now more than ever probably need coaching. But then there are obviously budgetary constraints and things like that we also have to take into consideration.
And that's a great point, because that's actually quite connected to my next question around this, which is about how is this current state transforming the way coaches operate or work? How is it impacting the business and everything they do?
Yeah, I think, well, what I'm noticing is how we structure our sessions, where and when. I've seen more people offer sort of pro bono sessions. But again, I want to be mindful that, for many people, this is their livelihood. So it's really thinking about how can I reposition things, right? So what I've seen some coaches do is reduce their time and make it like 30-minute power pack sessions instead of the usual hour. They've adjusted some of the costing. Maybe you can do more group sessions or group webinars that bring down the cost. How can you be mindful of what people can afford and what people need, and address that, as well as thinking about yourself, and what is important for you to sustain during this time. That's what I'm noticing, like different sessions. I'm noticing a lot of clients are doing big webinars to get people introduced. Actually, the kind of things that they probably didn't have a lot of time for before.
Interesting. Yeah. So I think it's important to be innovative as we address this and be more responsive to people's needs. And with that, actually, thank you everyone that's been sharing things in the chat with us, your experiences, and what you're going through. And I think one of the important things is that everything that we're doing today around utilizing our strengths, we need to think about how can we really go back to those core needs of people in this time and address them, right? So how can we generate trust? So speaking the truth more, being more direct, explaining the rationale behind decisions. And how can we show stability while we're going through our own emotional crisis internally? How do we demonstrate that calm by addressing those emotions? How do we really, show compassion in every interaction we have and, acknowledge that negative impact in people's lives? And lastly, how do we really generate hope by helping people, think about an optimistic future, but also really contribute to it by being who they are. So leveraging their natural talents in creating the hope together for the future. Lastly, before I wrap up this session, I just want to highlight to you, some of you have been asking how Gallup can help and what more can you have from here next. So if you haven't already do take your Clifton Strengths Assessment, and it would be a very handy tool for us. Reach out to us after the assessment and we can always help you think about how your strengths are playing out in this time. And there may not be a one-size-fits-all approach to this because each of your strengths are going to be different. So really you have to understand, really name, claim, and aim your strengths to responding to those needs. You can get certified and be the strengths experts as well. So we have an upcoming accelerated strengths course in June. So you can join that course and you can receive a Gallup certification, which also has ICF credits to it. You see an email address there, please screenshot it or take a picture or write it down. Reach out to Dorothy, and you can also avail group discounts if there are a few of you together that are joining this workshop. There's also a wonderful summit that Gallup's doing globally for coaches around the world. And you can join this just like you've joined this workshop, and you can get access to 20+ hours of great Gallup content similar to this hour. If you found this helpful, there's 20 hours more of similar content that you can get by registering to this event. And then lastly, we are doing a very different thing called the Strengths-Based Parenting Workshop. If you're a parent yourself or if you take care of kids around you, this might be a very useful session. Vidya is going to run this for us on 14th June. It's a 90-minute quick workshop on a Sunday evening that you can join to really be more strengths-based parents, right? So these are some options for you to really take this forward. Reach out to one of us for any questions or queries, or if you're interested in any of these options too. So with that, I'll wrap it up. If there are any more questions, we would love to address those. But that's going to be a sign off from me and Vidya here at Gallup. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Kanika and Vidya. We can do Q&A a little bit later after we've shared a few important details, and then everyone is welcome to stay back up until 12:50 when we need to close the session. So thank you very much. And wow, what a deeply reflective session exploring the importance of our basic human needs of trust, compassion, stability, and hope. And why these are no longer just nice to have concepts, but absolutely fundamental for achieving business results. I really love the way you clarified the importance of it. And thank you very much for demonstrating how these needs drive us as individuals and as teams to become more engaged, productive, and happier. Something that's even more important with disruption and uncertainty that we face today. So thank you very much, Kanika and Vidya, for bringing your experience, wisdom of decades to share with us here today. So, folks, your participation doesn't just end here. On the slide, I'm just going to share my slide in just a moment. One moment, please. Okay, you can see this slide, Harry, yes? Okay, great. On the slide, you'll see a QR code on the right. You can scan this on your phone now, and it will bring you to a webinar feedback survey where you can also register for further Gallup workshop, and also your CCEU application is also part of the same form. You can also access this via the URL that I have pasted in the chat a little bit earlier. I think, Harry, you saw that URL being posted? Yes? Okay, great. I'll post it again a little bit later once more. Before we move on, just wanted to announce for you to join us for our upcoming webinar later today, which is Collective Leadership in VUCA Times at 1:30 p.m. and Courage and Values in the Face of Adversity at 6:30 p.m. If you have not signed up for these, then please do so. I will be sharing the URLs for this in just one moment right now. I'll copy and paste that in here. There it is, one moment. So this URL is for the 1:30 session, and this URL coming up now is for the 6:30 p.m. session. So I trust you've had all the three URLs, one for feedback and one for 1:30 p.m. session and one for 6:30 p.m. session. If anyone needs it again, please let me know. So with that, I'll hand it over back to Kanika and Vidya for opening the floor up for any questions that they may want to answer. Thank you very much, Kanika and Vidya, once more.
Thank you, Avni. While some of you were pinging questions in the chat, do feel free to ask us again if you have any questions or any thoughts or comments. Just I would love to read those out for the rest of us to hear them. Anything that you would like to share. I know some of you were asking for a strengths pack, and I think Vidya, this would be great for us to sort of address around the individualization element of strengths, because some of the questions were around that. Could we have an information pack on what would help us on how we communicate with different strengths during this pandemic? So, like, what would be our, how we communicate with different strengths during this pandemic? How can we help them?
You're on silent, Vidya.
I'm so sorry. This is what I need to constantly get used to with Zoom. We don't have an information pack per se for like each of the different strengths, but I think we have information around how your different strengths can help and hinder you. And I think if you kind of expand that to thinking about how people will react, that can probably feed a little bit into maybe thinking about how you coach or address someone who might have that. But I think we're in the midst of actually, because this pandemic has become so relevant right now, we are in the midst of kind of thinking about, how these different strengths maybe addressed all of those needs, and that could also be relevant information that we could let you know when we do have that. I also saw another question, Kanika, and I think, do these strengths change over time? that someone asked. This is a very common question that we get asked. Now I guess there's a research-based response, and then there's also kind of maybe what I might say is my intuitive response. But the research-based response says, so what we've shown for people who have taken multiple administrations of StrengthsFinder throughout the course of their life is, in our database, is there's a 0.74 correlation between assessments. Right. So if I loosely translate that, you're about 74% likely to get the same results the next time you take that. That's pretty high generally for psychometric assessment tools, but it's not perfect. Right. So I think, we do see little shifts where, sometimes generally what's in the top 10 tends to stay there. So, your number 1 might drop to number 4, or number 6 might come up to number 2, but usually what's at the top tends to stay there, and what's at the bottom tends to stay. So it's not often that you see leaps and plunges if you're attempting it honestly. Having said that, like if you've been through an extreme life circumstance, something that really alters your outlook on life, and I don't necessarily mean getting a job or a new job or, getting married, but something that really alters your outlook, then yes, we have seen significant changes. But otherwise, it tends to be pretty consistent, right? And the more maybe informal way of looking at that is really, how different are we from what we used to be? I think sometimes we learn to mature our talents, right? So I'll give you an example. Activator is one of my talents, and it makes me highly, highly impatient. And I've constantly got feedback around being impatient because I have this urgency for action and things to happen. But what I think I've learned over time is I've learned to be a little bit more sophisticated about how I channel that. Has that died in me? Has it changed? Have I changed that sense of urgency? No. I think I still very much feel it, but I've learned how to project it in a more meaningful manner. I still sometimes slide into the slightly more negative space, I suppose, of being impatient, but I've seen how my talent has moved from a more raw state to a more mature state, and sometimes in life that can feel like a change.
Yeah, that's a great point, Vidya. And I think that kind of addresses someone's question around, Serene's question around, what about non-strengths, right? So how do we address those, or weaknesses as sometimes they're called? And I think I would just like to add on to that perspective that Vidya was sharing with an example that really when we talk about weakness or non-strengths, we're not saying don't address them, but it's important to understand what's getting in the way of you getting your work done, right? So we kind of identify a weakness as a barrier to getting to your outcomes. And if something is posing a barrier, you definitely need to address it. And one part of that is understanding where it's coming from. So like what Vidya was sharing with her activator example, it can sometimes come from our top talents or who we are naturally, and what our strengths are playing out in a raw form at times can manifest as weaknesses or areas of, things that we need to work on. So that's important to sort of address over here. And Vidya, I think I'll throw it back to you in terms of whether this assessment measures potential or behavior, and I think that talent strengths difference would be great to understand.
Yeah, I think it measures your potential. So you will see a list of potential talent you have. What I like about this is they're everyday talents. They're different from exclusive talents about, being able to sing really well or dance really well, right? Or be good at a sport. But these are everyday talents and things that maybe I do significantly better than other people, depending on my combination. But it is the potential. I always look at this as you have that potential to be excellent, and you turn it into a strength when you invest the knowledge and the skills to make it happen. Otherwise, it's potential that's effectively dead, right? There has to be investment, which is why, our strengths-based conversation really starts from, these are the things you're good at. You may already know it, but how can we make it better? What do you need to do? Are there things here that you have within you that you've never really leveraged or you've never used enough? How can you use that even more? What do you need to invest in that? And so, it measures the potential, but that's the starting point for you to move into the direction of turning it into a strength and making it successful.
Great. Yeah, I think there's also another question around weakness. Vidya, do you also want to share about how you've helped your clients address their weaknesses?
Okay, how do we help clients address? Okay, I often feel that the very things that you call your strengths have both what we might consider a light side and a dark side, right? The things that make us powerful are also like, if you think about superheroes, really, the analogy, you can use your power for good or for evil, right? And so, you know, how we talk about weaknesses is in our reports, actually, we have information around the blind spots of a talent, and the blind spots are the areas where you can sometimes slip. So, you know, going back to the example I gave earlier, you know, as an activator, I can drive change. I can make things happen. I can be a catalyst. These are all the good things that come out of that particular talent. Now, how that can sometimes come across is I'm impatient. You know, I act before I even think. You know, I'm like a bull in a china shop, right? So how we address weaknesses is often the very things I think that you think are your strengths can also sometimes be the potential where you slip, right? If you're not using them in the right way. So I think that's a conversation we have. And we, you know, we're very mindful about a weakness, not just being the things that are at the bottom of your report or things that don't appear in your dominant themes. They're really, what are your weaknesses in life? What is the feedback that you've got around your weaknesses? What have you seen in 360s? And often what I found when I'm coaching clients is the very things that surface as weaknesses are also the very things that are their strengths. Right? So in overuse or overdrive. So it's really about how do we manage that? You know, how do we navigate? What else do you have to complement you in your top that can help you address that weakness? You know, how do you blend your activator with something else to make it a little more meaningful?
Yeah, that's great. And I think we'll take one last question as we're running out of time, but I think this is a very appropriate one in terms of how different leaders' strengths can be very different and how do you help them accept it? So I know we always come up with this example of, you know, what if a chief strategy officer doesn't have strategic in their talents that naturally come up, right? What does that mean? How do you get them to accept it? So really talking about how do you make leaders accept their strengths. Vidya, do you want to share with us a little bit about that difference?
Yeah. So I just want to say the grass is always greener on the other side. Everybody wants what they don't have. I've spoken to leaders who have strategic in their top 5 and they're like, I don't know why it's there. I don't even feel I have it. And then I've spoken to others who don't have it and they're kind of like, why is it not there? I mean, I think it's not saying that you don't have any of these things. It's really what drives you the most. When we look at the report, I'm very mindful of telling people this is not a list of what you can do and what you cannot do. It's a list of your motivations or the things that really drive you, right? What's your path to getting somewhere? So, you know, there's a talent called empathy. And this is probably the biggest bone of a contention when people see it right at the bottom of their report. They're like, how can I not have empathy? I'm a leader, you know, that's so important. And you know, the first thing I always ask people, are you shocked because you do not see it? You know, because that's how the reality is. Is that what's happening in real life? Or are you shocked because of what you see in a report? Right? And most of the time they're shocked because of what they see in a report. So really that's not a problem, right? So I always make sure I separate empathy as an outcome, showing empathy versus empathy as a driver, right? What drives you to show that? I've shown empathy sometimes. I mean, this is going to sound very heartless, but I've shown empathy sometimes because I know that's the only way to get to my goal, right? And that's really my achiever that's driving me to create an outcome of empathy. So, you know, a lot of times when leaders start to think about what is really driving me, why did I do that? Why did I say that, right? When you ask them open questions about what made them behave in a certain way, they're often able to direct it back to what surfaces higher. And you know, and be mindful of what's not that high.
Great.
Thank you very much, Vidya. Thank you, Kanika. We have another session starting at 12:50, so I'm afraid we've run out of time. It's been great Q&A, very engaging. If it's okay with you, let's all take a quick picture of ICW, okay? So make your hands ICOW, whatever you like, okay? And who's taking a picture?
I'm taking the picture, yes.
Awesome, awesome, Harry.
Right, just 1 second. Okay.
Just stay still, looking good.
Sorry, right, ready. Keep going. And one more, because we've got lots of people. And we are done. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everyone. Fantastic session. Thank you very, very much. And
thank you.
yeah, look forward to connecting with everyone another time. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.